Guys, Andrew Henderson, nomadcapitalist.com here in Bogota, Colombia. And it is out. Yet another year has passed. And I finally got a chance to go over the Heritage Foundation's Economic Freedom Index for 2017. Lots of interesting insights in there. Wanted to go over some of the highlights with you today, give you some thoughts, and tell you what I think of it. So every year, Heritage Foundation comes out with this index. They rank economic freedom, and they rank all but about 6 or 7 countries. And the winners and losers at the very top and the very bottom tend to be the same for as long as I can remember, even going back to being a kid and discussing this with my father. Hong Kong is number 1, Singapore is number 2. At the very bottom, the usual suspects: Venezuela, Eritrea, North Korea, not doing so well. So those are as usual. You've got 5 countries in the top which are considered very free: Hong Kong, Singapore, Australia, New Zealand, and Switzerland. You've got about 29 additional countries that are largely free, and then a whole bunch of countries that are moderately free, not so free, etc. What I found interesting in this year's index were some of the placements for the first time, some of the winners, some of the losers. The biggest gainers, Vanuatu, one of the biggest gainers in terms of economic freedom. I was there a couple months ago doing some research. Romania, which I've been moderately bullish on for a couple of years, was a big improvement. They're doing very well. Actually, Belarus, surprisingly, was perhaps the biggest gainer. Not convinced that Belarus is the place to go yet, but apparently they're doing some things right there. Biggest loser, I believe, was the Bahamas. Lots of friends there who tell me that the government only pays lip service to investors. Not a good place to go. Oman, Bahrain, big losers. Barbados, big loser. Here's the other big loser. Los Estados Unidos, the United States, coming in 17th place. I think when I first started tracking this years ago, it was definitely in the top 10. And you think, okay, the United States has a lot of downsides, but when you look at certain things like ease of starting a business, it's relatively easy. Ease of closing down a business. I'm dealing with closing down a couple of companies I never got around to using in 2 different European countries right now, and it's a pain. Coming from the United States, it almost makes me long for the days of starting US LLCs and shutting those down for $50. But the United States has dropped from its perch of 13th, where for the last couple of years it was barely keeping up with or losing to the capitalist bastion of Denmark. Now it has fallen a couple of places down to 17th. For the first time, the country that has eclipsed it, you heard it here first, is the Republic of Georgia, which has taken its place at number 13. The Republic of Georgia has been saying that they're in the top 10. I've seen some press out there from some of my friends in the diplomatic corps. They are number 13 in 2017. But what a dramatic turnaround for the Republic of Georgia. We've been talking about it for a long time. Talked about it just the other day as an interesting place to spend some time every year as a nomad, but they are certainly doing a lot of things well. And so that kind of brings me to my thoughts on the index. One of the things that I don't entirely agree with the index on is that it does seem to be built for folks who want to go and run a factory, or want to import cars or caviar, or export chips or whatever the Seinfeld reference was. And for those of us who are just running smaller businesses, we don't want to hire a ton of people. We maybe just want to access part of the economy. The index, to me, doesn't necessarily capture all of that. I mean, the fact that Australia is in the top 5 with its ridiculous tax rates, with the ATO that is one of the more aggressive tax agencies in the world, to me, I mean, that has to be a factor. Having a good court system. How many of us who are in business have never ever been involved in litigation, or have very rarely been involved in litigation? That we need some kind of amazing court system. I'm not saying that court systems aren't important. I'm not saying that tariffs aren't important, but I also am saying that for those of us who are running businesses with smaller footprints, the index doesn't entirely capture it, because while Australia may have a lot of things going for it, I also think that at times it's got too much rule of law, as does the United States, as do a lot of the other Western countries. And so I think that has to be taken into account. I think that there are some discounts that I would give the big Western countries. I mean, the fact that Denmark and Sweden are in the top 15 or 20. I can think of 20 countries I'd rather start a business in than Denmark or Sweden. Um, you know, I also think that there are some countries that are overhyped. I think Estonia probably deserves to be at number 6, but I think that the country is overhyped. They're doing a lot of things remarkably well, but they're also marketing it in such a way that people think that they're going to go to Estonia and pay no tax, when in reality Estonia has tax. And in fact, I recently helped talk a guy out of doing business in Estonia and saved him about $30,000 a year by moving him to a different place. So I think that the Georgias of the world, the Romanias of the world, the Vanuatus of the world, perhaps more of an outlier, speak to the success of the index and why the rankings are important. The fact that countries like the United States are falling, I think, is important, and speaks to the fact that the United States probably won't be in the top 20 even in the near future. So the trends are interesting. I know when you talk to guys who are in like the search engine marketing and the content marketing business, Ryan Dice, I think, for example, from Digital Marketer said, don't look at analytics as the exact numbers, look at them as trends. And so does Estonia being number 6 matter? Perhaps not entirely, but what matters is Estonia has done very well for itself since the index was created. Meanwhile, the US is falling. Meanwhile, other countries are falling, especially in the Arab Gulf and the Caribbean. So I think that the winners and losers and the rise and fall countries are more important to study. And for me, the United States is punching well below its weight, considering many of its English-speaking neighbors are staying well within their positions, and I think the UK may actually rise in the next year, whereas the US is dropping. When you add in the high tax burden in most of the countries in the top 20, to me, it's the Georgias, it's the Estonias that really stand out. It's the Romanias that I think will stand out in the near future. So definitely very interesting intelligence from the Heritage Foundation Index. Don't agree with everything that they say as a think tank. Don't agree with the entire index. And think that it should be modified and you should take the bits and pieces that serve you. But definitely very positive to see the countries that we talk about here at Nomad Capitalist doing remarkably well, punching above their weight, rising the rankings. I think you're going to see Georgia in the top 10 in the near future. That doesn't mean you should go and start your company there, by the way. Doesn't mean that that's the answer to all of your problems. What it does mean is that you are seeing a lot more investment from places like the Arab world, from the Chinese in some of these countries like Georgia, like Romania, like Vanuatu, that I think is partially being driven by easier than ever economies to access. So there's something to be said for that as well. For more on where to set up shop yourself, by the way, probably the chances are these countries that are on this list aren't going to be your go-to countries, at least for the majority of your plan if you're a business owner. So for some of us, this is kind of anecdotal, at least for a large part of what we do. But if you want to find out more about my favorite places to go, how to set up the Nomad Capitalist lifestyle for yourself, to pay less in tax, have more freedom, get the best of everything, and to go where you're treated best, nomadcapitalist.com is our website for that, and you can subscribe to our channel below for all of our latest videos on living freely and prosperously.